Welcome everybody to our national discussion. This is the continuation of our 2040 film discussion, post-film discussion that was held at a local chapter, and now we are bringing it to a national discussion. My name is Erin Bird. I'm a representative from the Circular Economy Club in Calgary, and yeah, I want to welcome everybody who's here today. Please pardon any technical, we're still getting used to this virtual environment. So if we have some little technical glitches or some things that happen along the way, please just pardon that and know that we're all learning through this together. We have a great team of people from across Canada, this circular economy chapters across Canada who have been part of putting this together, as well as, Nancy from Globe Delphi, who's in the background helping us with the tech stuff and got us started on this Zoom call. So just want to acknowledge everyone who has helped out in the background and all of you who have helped out in your local chapters having the discussion. So we're going to get started with the presentation now. So Audrey, move on to the next slide, please. So as mentioned, this session is hosted by, it's actually, I think, the first time we have done something like this where we have Circular Economy Club chapters across Canada who have all come together to put this event together in hopes of getting a commitment, a unified commitment for a circular economy future by 2040. So we have Calgary, London, Quebec, Toronto, and Vancouver represented. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the other groups that have sort of tuned into these different chapters along the way. And we also want to acknowledge our sponsors. Ethos Assets sponsored the film screening cost, and we were able to make that an unlimited film screening, so people are still able to watch the film on Vimeo until April 22nd. So I encourage you that even if you run into people who haven't seen the film yet, please encourage them to keep watching it until Earth Day. And also want to acknowledge Globe Series and Delphi Group, who have been very kind in allowing us to use their commercial Zoom account or webinar Zoom account so that we could have as many people as we wanted and didn't have to limit attendance. So our event schedule today, we will be doing a welcome and land acknowledgement. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the summary of key themes and insights that were retrieved from the chapters and groups that participated in the local discussions. And then we're going to look at the common themes across all the groups, and we're going to do a bit of polling to narrow down what our priority focus areas are, and we'll have a chance to do some open brainstorm discussion, and I encourage you, please use the chat for that as much as possible, because we will be keeping a copy of this chat transcript so we can refer back to it and make sure that all of the discussion is reflected in the key consolidated message that we want to post on Earth Day. So that will be our call to action that we will develop in time for Earth Day. So we are a global community and we respect where everyone is coming from. In Canada, it's becoming normal for us to acknowledge our privilege to be in the place we are in. Land acknowledgements stem from an Indigenous tradition that dates back centuries. In our place, we offer acknowledgement and recognition of the original inhabitants and caretakers of what is now Canada, part of Turtle Island. This is part of our truth and reconciliation process with the First Nations, the Indigenous peoples of Canada. Along with a deep understanding of its context and meaning, making a land acknowledgement is a small but important first step in the reconciliation process between Canada's Indigenous people and those who came after. So we ask that you take a moment to reflect on research and understand your own local context about the lands where you live, work, and play. In this spirit, we acknowledge that for all of us, this is sacred land on which each of us are privileged to be. This land, nearby lakes and sea, has supported human beings for thousands of years and is rich in history, knowledge, and tradition. We are privileged to be beneficiaries and the steward of all that has come before on behalf of the 7 generations to come and beyond. We invite you to consider your relationship to the land and how you benefit from being there, while the original caretakers may not. Take a moment to reflect on, research, understand, honor, and respect peoples indigenous to the lands where you live, work, and play. My own land is Makinstis in Blackfoot, and it's the elbow of two rivers. Today, each place around the world is increasingly home to peoples from across the world, and we are each grateful to have the opportunity to be where we are today. Thank you. So to just elaborate a little bit more on some of the participating groups who have been, part of the local discussions. I mean, there's a huge list here of all the different groups. So, we've had some Green Economy Club groups from across Canada. In Calgary, where I'm from, we have a transition series, which is a coalition of different nonprofit and organizations that are trying to push sustainable initiatives as well. We've had some school groups, from universities also participate. So, there's been a lot of people that have been plugged into this, which is amazing to see. So before we get started, some ground rules. And I mean, I know people are all getting familiar with being in virtual meetings, and I guess a conference meeting is a little bit different than a regular meeting, but we are recording this session. So you will be able to watch the video later and be able to relive through the conversations. And we are taking extensive notes as well in the background, because we want to make sure that all the feedback can be incorporated into our Earth Day message. I'm not sure how possible it is for people who are attendees to have their camera on, but if you are, you're welcome to keep it on if you're able to. Please use the chat to introduce yourself, and you can connect to other individuals. We'd love to hear or see your LinkedIn profiles, and so then people can connect even after today. You can use the reaction buttons to show your support, like a thumbs up or clapping hands when you see something that you really like. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. And we thought we had a question box. I don't think we do. So we're just going to use the chat. And also, if you tend to be a very vocal person, make sure that you're allowing space for everyone to share their opinions, because we want to have as diverse a lens on these issues as we can, and really make sure that everyone's able to participate in the discussion. So some introductory slides. I mean, I think most of the people on the call today have an idea of what circular economy is, but it's really about changing the way we look at how we use, how we make things, use them, and then the conventional way is to discard them at end of life, and we want to change that so that waste becomes a non-word, that we're removing waste. And the ways that we can do that is by trying to have a bit of a perpetual cycle where we're able to regenerate and restore the whole way. So we're not actually getting to end of life, we're just getting to a new product or a new use. So we want sometimes takes a little while for people to reimagine what that looks like. And, people are in different stages across their spectrum of understanding of this. And we just have to meet people where they're at and encourage them to take their thought process in a more circular way. And that's what we're here to promote today. So the scope of our feedback nationally, we did have 6 different groups that participated, 2 from Toronto, 2 from London, 1 from Burnaby, and 1 from Calgary. We had 85 participants participating in the local discussions across. I think many more had RSVP'd, but not everybody could make the local discussions. So we're hoping that there's actually many more. Oh, we have here 139 people downloaded the film, and I think that's still continuing because we've extended the film viewing now till April 22nd. So we're really excited that we were able to get more and more people engaged in this conversation. And we've had feedback from nonprofits, environmental groups, business network, and but as far as a circular economy action plan, municipal action plan, I think a lot of people are still in their infancy on that, and it's still something that we need to probably advocate with our government officials to do more on. And that's why we're here today too, is so if we can develop a vision or a statement, a commitment statement on where we want to push change and make action happen, then that's going to benefit all of us across the country. So did you know, this is something that came out of one of the discussion groups, that the Canadian Circular Cities and Regions Initiative is offering these government opportunities for a one-year mentoring program. Um, I'm, and I'm hearing that nobody has applied for this pilot yet. So at first we were going to ask like who's applied for this, and then we realized I don't think anyone has applied for this, and it's probably barely on people's radar. So this is a time where we want to let you know about this. It's a pretty exciting opportunity, and please, contact us if you want more information about this Canadian Circular Cities and Regions Initiative. I'm not sure, George, if you wanted to unmute and just mention a little bit about this as well.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, I actually sat in on the webinar that they did on March the 18th, I believe it was. So it's open to all cities across the country, cities and regions. So I actually reached out to the CCRI today to see if how it was going with the activity level. I haven't heard back from them, so it's a little bit under the radar right now. So we'll keep an eye on it and keep everyone informed.
Great, thanks, George. So this is just a bit of a recap on the thoughts that were coming from the film, from the different groups, and we had an Airtable where basically different groups could consolidate their feedback, and then we took a look at all of the consolidated feedback from different groups, and we're coming up with some common themes. And one really important thing that I want to highlight is that the circular economy provides hope towards reaching our 2040 goals, and that's really important. I think now more than ever, a lot of people are maybe feeling a little bit of despair with COVID and the way things have been going. I think watching this film was really uplifting for a lot of people, and the fact that a lot of people were also watching it with their families and maybe using that opportunity to connect socially with other people in the community. It's something that was really great to see. Also, the fact that we're recognizing that advocacy and creating partnerships with other groups, initiatives, and businesses is really important, and is something that I think a lot of people are trying to do a lot on. That we're in the early implementation launch phase around the municipal targets, and so that's maybe where we want to push a little bit more. But even just having those targets, it seems like everyone's pretty aligned that we want to achieve the waste diversion rates, and diversion is just the tip of the iceberg. For a circular economy, we want to really not just divert waste, but really get into kind of the circular opportunities and job opportunities from that. So some important collaborative learnings and actions are that if we can support the on the ground environment efforts, that's going to be key. This increasing awareness and education, we still have a big job to do across Canada. So, trying to do that in the way that we do with our events and volunteer opportunities, and then just creating those meaningful, engaging partnerships. So those were some of the thoughts we had stemming from the feedback on the film. And then this is another interesting poll. We had asked the question, has watching the film 2040 changed your group's perspective of where you would like to focus your future climate action? And it's interesting when you look at this, you see that, there's a huge percentage of people that said, yes, this film actually did change the way they thought. And then there's a portion of people that said no. And to myself, I was ruminating, oh, I wonder if they said no because they were already thinking in that way. And that's what I'm pretty hopeful. I think there's a lot of groups that have already been thinking in the same way. Maybe there were still some people that are completely unaware, and maybe this brought some awareness, or maybe it changed the way they thought. So this is awesome. Watching the film, this is a quote, watching the film allowed us to take a step back from our organization's mandated role to look at individual changes we can make to drive environmental action in our communities. So it's good to see that this film really did have an impact, and watching it together across the country, I think is another way just for us to connect, even if we can't do it in person. Some other findings, we did another poll around the barriers, the biggest barriers, and you'll see that there's not a big spread on the amount of people that voted for each of them. However, finding volunteers and community cooperations or mobilization were the two biggest barriers that were seen. I guess because probably a lot of the people participating in the discussions are part of grassroots movements, you know, finding volunteers and being able to mobilize together is very challenging. Financial barriers was another one, obviously, and then policy and bureaucratic or barriers, policy and bureaucratic barriers was another one. The one that wasn't really touched on was measuring impact, and I'm wondering if it's because we're kind of more focused on these other ones for now, and then maybe measuring impact will be more important as we go, but we'll see how that goes. So I did mention a little bit on this previously in our takeaways, but some important actions that we can take are to support and participate in on-the-ground environmental efforts. And we'll probably see that echoed through some of the discussions that we're going to have on the common themes. Increase awareness and engagement to environmental education. So the education piece that was highlighted quite a bit in the film, and it was also highlighted quite a bit in our follow-up discussions. So a lot of people thought that there were some real strides that we could make in that realm. And then create meaningful and engaging partnerships. And I think that's probably a bit of a no-brainer, but yeah, it was, you know, something that I think we saw even in coming together to have this event across Canada, that, you know, the more that we can leverage what each other is doing in our respective regions, the stronger we can become as a movement. And this one's really cool. I'm going to let George maybe talk a little bit to this, because you put together this visual talking about different business models that are actually available. So these are solutions happening right now in Canada.
Right. So on our circular economy wheel, as we like to call it, we just see basically the value chain within circular models. Everything from in the beginning of sourcing, manufacturing, all the way to the end of life and reverse logistics. So what we've done is we've plotted, this is just a sampling of some of the biz models and the business, an example of a business that's in that business model. So for example, if we look at on the sourcing on the left side, we see a buy local in Calgary, where they're using Calgary dollars for shopping local. In fact, there's another one like that in Toronto, the Digital Main Street, which was actually set up post-pandemic to get businesses online and help with local shopping too. We see going up from Calgary, called Calgary dollars, we see fair trade in the sourcing side, refilleries, Unbox Market, which is making its way around the country, urban food, Ripple Farms, and then in the autonomous car area, just natural to Canada for testing in the winter conditions, a project going on at University of Waterloo. Then we see going around clockwise, we also have sharing models. So on the red patch on the right-hand side of the model, we see there are a number of sharing models and also platforms. For example, BizBizShare is something that started in Quebec and is making its way across the country as a sharing platform. In the food market, we see Be One to Give also there. Net zero building application, we see a developer such as Sifton Properties in London doing some work there. And then finally, down in the bottom right, we see areas on the very bottom, for example, a company like Envirotech, which has been in the furniture remanufacturing for about 20 years already. So even though the circular economy models are, you know, fairly new, there have been businesses that have been actually acting with circularity for a while. Our sponsor, Ethos Assets, has been operating for a while in the repurposing side. And then there are also a number of reuse models too. For example, 2 libraries popping up all over the country, and takeout containers. So I think that's a pretty good sampling of what.
Yeah, that's really great. And I was thinking even for Calgary, like we definitely have a number of refilleries like the Apothecary, Canary Goods. We have quite a few of those. We have the Food Share and Leftovers Foundation, Leftovers YYC, that tries to repurpose waste food. The Communauté community car sharing that's now in Calgary. I think it might even be in other cities across Canada. The idle asset sharing, we have a company called Ruckify that I believe is trying to expand across Canada too. So there's a lot more examples even that, as we take a look at all of these different business models, it's pretty exciting to see that all these different things are popping up across the country. And what we could do, so I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I'm thinking that we could create a bit of a resource sheet of all of these business models and how they fit on the wheel to provide to people after the session, because I think it would be really helpful just to, and also very motivating to see what's happening across the country. So just something that maybe we can take away from the session today.
Yeah, and I would suggest even in the chat box too, Erin, that any of our guests today can throw in any other models that they're aware of too, any other companies.
Yes, please use the chat as much as possible to share the resources that you know of already, because that can just help our overall, our Canadian community to, build each other up and create a stronger movement. Next slide. Yeah. So we did have a question about the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, I don't think it's any surprise that we have quite a few of them mentioned here. And obviously, we're demonstrating partnership for the goals in just having an event like this together. But so many different areas of sustainability and Sustainable Development Goals that are being touched by the film and by our discussions following the film. So we have a summary of key themes that were pulled out from the feedback that was given. And I'm just going to go over it very briefly. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to poll each of you on what top 3 areas you'd like to focus on. So I'm going to do a very quick synopsis just to sort of trigger people's memories on, what the film talked about and what people in the discussion groups talked about. So renewable energy, there was a lot of talk in the movie about microgrids and solar, but even the fact of in the follow-up discussions, we were talking about energy decentralization, microgrid technology, both locally as well as in developing countries, community power, and other types of renewables, wind, solar, geothermal, lots of renewable energy talks following the film discussion. For transportation, there was a lot in the film about autonomous vehicles, driverless ride sharing, urban spaces repurposed, and reducing vehicle traffic. So having lanes of traffic turned into areas for animals to graze or food growing. So that was pretty exciting stuff. For food systems, we were talking a lot in our chapter in Calgary about urban farming and trying to change policy to allow backyard chickens and things like that. The whole offshore opportunity with the seaweed, regenerative farming, which is a big theme that's happening in a lot of different cities as well, and responsible consumption, just trying not to buy as much and maybe go to the shops more often rather than go to Costco and get so much for your whole family and then end up wasting half of it. So just some triggers to remind you of some of the discussions. For education, it was around school dashboards, being able to have volunteer opportunities for people to experience, things that are related to circular economy, whether it's fixing something, whether it's working with the soil, the communication channels that are available both at schools as well as just to general public, maybe making it more competitive by having it on a subway or having it in a public space. Social connections, so talking about connections that we make through doing things together, such as community gardens, growing together, having a real connection to people who may not have as good access to food as well. The dashboard as well touched a little bit on social connections and how can we hear what each other's doing and monitor it, and then the hands-on opportunities to get our hands dirty, as well as social connections around what our history has been and what our traditional knowledge keepers have to offer to us. For partnerships, collaboration between government, schools, businesses, environmental groups. I mean, I think we try to do as much as we can with partnerships, but sometimes we still feel a little bit siloed. So talk about how do we mobilize more and make sure that we're breaking down silos. Meaningful community action, so creating a coalition, again, and along the same vein as partnerships. How do we onboard volunteers or people who are new to environmental concepts or environmental action better so that we're able to really mobilize them quicker, get them on board? And then inclusivity and equity, making sure that we're talking about environmental justice, making sure that we don't have environmental racism, that we're offering equal access to all people, no matter what their socioeconomic, cultural background is, making sure we have those diverse lenses so that we're hearing everybody in the room and not just certain more vocal people. So that's just a very quick summary of the main themes, and there are 8 of them. So there are a lot of themes that came out from the film and the follow-up local discussions. But now we're going to have a bit of a polling. We're going to do a poll, and we're going to ask you to pick your top 3. So only your top 3 choices, because we are going to try and talk about the top 5 out of this. So it looks like the food systems is top, education, as well as renewable energy, the meaningful community action, and transportation. So we will also try to do these in order of importance. So food systems being 1, education being 2, it's kind of a tie between renewable energy. So I'll make renewable energy 3, the meaningful, renewable energy 3, meaningful conversation 4, and transportation 5. So food systems is going to be our first topic of discussion. And just to get you thinking, some of the things that came out of the feedback that was given to us was, a lot of conversations on urban farming. How can we free up new space, new techniques for farming, community involvement. For urban farming, there's vacant lots that can be reused for urban farming, green roofs, greenhouses. And then offshore farming, tapping into potential of the sea, new foods, new ecosystems, the whole seaweed and how that can actually help with climate change. Regenerative farming, so benefits for farmers, the crops, the atmosphere, so making a change from where we have feedlots and where we have pesticide crops and instead make it more natural crops where we're able to use certain species of plants to help regenerate the soil naturally without the use of pesticides, really focus on healthy soils. And then responsible consumption, just, not buying in excess, trying to use what we already have, try to look for ways to reuse waste products of food if we can. So the discussion questions: consider the ways these initiatives help with our carbon drawdown. Can these initiatives succeed with traditional owner-operator, or will they take a new breed? And how can consumers play a positive role? So if you want to make a comment, or you can either do it in the chat or you can raise your hand, and anyone from our panel can jump into.
Audrey here.
Yeah.
Were you going to ask me to do something before
I was going to ask you to actually speak to this.
Oh, there you go. Well, I have some friends. My home is in a sort of a rural urban zone, just on the edge of urban into rural, and I've had many farmers as neighbors, and there should be some benefits to farmers for the carbon drawdown that they do, as long as they are doing farming practices that are regenerative without any pesticides and using natural compost and nutrients back onto their soil. And really, they should have tax benefits, or they should be able to, have carbon tax ability. So what's everybody's thought on that? Do farmers get a fair shake in this? Shouldn't they be rewarded? I think Rue has her hand up.
Go ahead.
I think a bit in response to Audrey, I do think that farmers need to have more support. So one of the things that I talk about in terms of circular economy is to create more connection to local farmers. So we have local farmers and farmers markets that are in our regions. And, instead of encouraging industrial food systems that we import, we need to create a way we can support and directly connect our consumers to them. And another thing that I want to talk about is we talk about food systems. And I think one thing that's lacking here is we should find a way to coordinate with indigenous groups, because a lot of indigenous teaching talks about regenerative agriculture and having a relationship with the land, and also talking about conservation. And I think instead of always looking into new innovative things, there's things that we are doing locally in our regions that we need to bring to light.
So I see that Preston also has a comment. I'm not sure, Preston, are you able to unmute yourself and speak to this?
I don't think he can.
Okay, sorry. We thought maybe this would be able to be more of a conversation. That's okay. Eating seasonally is a very different perspective that changes our relationship with how we decide what we eat. And yeah, I have to agree with that too. A lot of people want to focus on how we can eat completely locally. And if we wanted to do that, I have some buzz in the background. I'm not sure if that's Preston trying to talk or not.
Yeah, I think I'm on, am I?
Yeah, you're on. Awesome.
Yeah, actually it was my relationship with Fresh City Farms. I started being a subscriber to theirs probably 6 or 8 years ago, and they provide a lot of seasonal food. And so I didn't actually request a very specific food to come to me. And so it actually began a process of learning what was local, learning what was seasonal, and having to spend a little bit of time thinking about how to prepare things that I had never heard of before. So it created a very different relationship for our family and for the house to think about what we're eating, why we're eating it, and to be a part of that journey rather than simply going to the grocery store and getting pineapples in the middle of winter.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I also am involved in the fair trade movement, and so I've been trying to buy some of my produce like bananas and avocados and mangoes as fair trade when I can, but it is very dependent because different seasons in different countries have to be the right season, and then the timing has to work where they can bring it over to Canada. But I don't think a lot of people think about that. You go to the grocery store and you're able to get a mango and you don't really care where it's coming from, and you don't think about that it might not be in season where you're at, or maybe we've sort of become disconnected from seasons. It's a strange thing.
We also forget that you're supporting an economy, and so if you're supporting the farmers in your region, you're creating resilience here. The dollars stay in the area rather than going outside. So when we have scenarios like in California with massive climate issues and problems with extreme weather events and all these types of things, we are likely to begin reaching a point where food does become a question. Prices start to go up and things become uncertain. And so the more we're able to focus on local food and urban food, it gives a lot more opportunity to be a little more stable. And being a country obviously that relies a lot on imported food, I think it's something that we need to think a lot about.
Yeah, maybe I'll let Rue talk to your comment as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add that when I buy food from groceries, from a farmer's market instead of from a big box, I remember I bought carrots and it lasted for weeks, whereas they've gone bad within a week. So if you talk about the food waste that is created from industrial agriculture systems, that we could have access to fresher food for longer, and we wouldn't have to waste food or waste money on food, right? And I want to talk about another point, is that there is a humongous issue of food waste. I think only 30% of food doesn't go to waste in our society. And so we think about circular systems, need to figure out ways to prevent food waste in terms of smarter buying, where we're producing them, how long they can keep fresh in the stores for, and how we can redirect food that's about to go bad, but it won't go bad, into places that need them, you know, for people in need or for community fridgers.
Great. I think we're going to go to our poll now. Okay, so we're going to bring up our poll question number 5. And the question is, nutrition has been identified as a key goal in the 2021 Circle Economy Gap Report. Which aspect of the food value chain do you think has the most impact? The processing. That's actually a little bit surprising, but that's interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Thanks for your comments on that. Okay, well, we're going on to our next one, which was education. And thanks, please keep putting comments in the chat. I see Laura's mentioned about Bruce Company working towards reducing food waste. Leftovers YYC is the group here in Calgary that's looking to reuse waste as well. Moving on to education. So from the discussion, we found that the groups to engage should be the youth through schools, local communities, personal networks, and business networks. And other ways to increase awareness include celebrating environmental organizations and their progressive business models. The progressive business models in different cities, the volunteer opportunities, events, and advocacy, leveraging communication channels to share petitions, book, movie recommendations, community information, and through meaningful discussion. So some discussion questions for you to think about, and we can get into the discussion after that, is what was effective for you in increasing your own awareness on environmental issues? How can we reach people who are not involved in the environmental space? You know, yeah, it's easy when we're in it, but when you're not in it or you're trying to reach people who have no awareness of it. And can you share examples of initiatives that have increased environmental awareness to a wider audience? So we will now just have some open discussion, and this was Ruse, right? Or who did this one, the education?
Yep, this is the one I...
Did you want to speak further to the slide and the discussion questions?
I guess it's just wanted to think about the actions that we can take to increase awareness. And I do agree that, you know, when I'm in an environmental space, people are very aware and we can have really powerful discussions. But the moment I leave the space, it's really hard to connect to our wider audiences. And we really need to bring on a huge movement of people to the, you know, because we're all here working really hard for it, but then we really need to sort of change our culture, you know, to put the environment and social issues in the forefront.
So Tom has his hand up. Tom, why don't you go ahead? Or was it George? I see George's hand up as well.
I'll chime in here.
Sure.
On the dashboard that we saw in the movie, especially for the school children, I'm not sure if it was for business too, but I seem to remember a business called Zero Footprint that was around the market. This is maybe in the GTA area, Greater Toronto. And it may be as far back as 10 years ago that they had this dashboard out and running for business and for students. But I can't seem to find it these days. So if anyone has heard about it, or anyway, I just wanted to flag that name, Zero Footprint, as a great tool that we could all use if we could find it.
Yeah, if anyone happens to be doing some searching on Google and finds it, please post it in the chat. That would be awesome. And Audrey?
Yeah, I just thought I'd mention along the lines of the dashboard, there are schools that put solar panels on their rooftop or racks, and then they have monitors to demonstrate what's being generated. And also in net zero or LEED buildings where there's a requirement for understanding your energy consumption, the tenants or employees within the company also learn how their energy use or their behavior impacts the energy use of the building. So demonstrating the energy use or the way that you're creating new energy through a dashboard, as they used as an example in the film, is so incredibly powerful. And especially if you can include our youth, you know, at a younger age, start off in that area. That's where a lot of focus needs to be right now.
So I see Lindsay typing something about Eco Schools Canada. Did you want to speak to your comment, Lindsay?
Sorry, I might have some background noise. Yeah, recently the City of Calgary partnered with Eco Schools Canada and the Alberta Council for Environmental Education to bring this into schools. And the really neat thing is that each school gets their own dashboard. And then you also get to see the collective dashboard of each school board. And then you also get to roll it up to a city level and to a provincial level. And embedded within their 40 actions is making that space in the school where the students start to see their energy consumption at school.
Wow, that's great.
That is.
Did you want to try going back to Tom?
No, I don't think he had his hand up. I was mistaken there. But Tom, if you do want to say something, please put it, let us know. You can chime in. I was going to mention too that there's a teacher that I know quite well who's part of an arts academy here in Calgary, and he is also really into video games and gaming, and he's created Minecraft World where kids can explore environmental issues or fair trade issues or other types of social issues in Minecraft and get rewarded points for doing certain actions, that would be considered sustainable. So there's so many different ways that education can take form. It doesn't have to be, strictly spreadsheets and numbers. It could be in a fun gaming type of way. Any other comments from the floor? Don't feel too shy. No one's gonna bite here.
Laura's got her hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna add in, similar to Audrey and Lindsay's comments, the Living Building Challenge really encourages people to turn their buildings into living laboratories and encouraging them to take actions for community resiliency and food resiliency and incorporating connections to nature in their buildings. So schools that follow that certification standard really have a lot of ways to connect kids to not just energy, but also a lot of other aspects of sustainability and circular economy.
Awesome. Yeah, the Minecraft, the guy, his business is Infinite Mind. Sorry, I'm gonna be challenged to try to look that up while I'm moderating, but if anyone wants to look up Infinite Mind, he's based out of Calgary. He is a teacher at Calgary Arts Academy, and he also does online courses of Minecraft and how to engage students in gaming that will promote sustainability. So yeah, I can also share resources with everybody afterwards as well. Well, maybe we'll move on to our poll question, because I know we have 2 poll questions for education. So poll number 6, which is the most effective educational tool for you? So we have either events like this, social media, emails, news, discussion with engaged peers and friends, books and movies, community groups and volunteer opportunities, or through school systems. It looks like community groups and volunteer opportunities is number 1 with, quite a number of votes for books and movies and events like this. So it's good to know. Great. And maybe we'll go on to our second poll around education. So where do you actively engage for environmental action? So, and you can connect or choose more than one option here. So either through personal networks, business relationships, environmental groups, nonprofits, advocacy groups and events, social media, with your local government. Wow. Well, still switching. Yeah, we'll give people some time, don't worry. Oh, I see Lindsay has her hand raised. Did you want to pipe in here too?
Yeah, sorry, Erin. I just wanted to pipe in on sort of how do you get people or how do you reach those people who aren't engaged in environmental action? And I read a paper once that suggested that there's like very specific times or life events that you can capitalize on to help increase different people's environmental awareness. So one of the times is, of course, when people are young, when students are learning about things. But other life events include when people are expecting a child, or if there's a severe weather event in someone's life that makes them start to think about things differently, or some other sort of shock in someone's life, like when they might get sick. So like, I think it's hard to start to strategize about how you reach out to people other than around the life event of having a child. But those are sort of key times when people might be looking for something new or looking for some more information specifically around the environment.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Lindsay, because I also think that, you know, oftentimes when crisis happens, we tend to think we should shut down, or maybe just we need to shut down for our own mental health. But honestly, a time like this during the pandemic is also a very good opportunity to bring awareness to issues, especially because pandemics can be caused in some part by the way that we live and our unsustainable practices. So, you know, although it's sometimes taxing for people and exhaustive for people to hear that they need to change at a time when they're already feeling maybe a little bit drained, it's also a great time to bring hope in that if we do change, and it can be in slow ways as well as major ways, then we could make a real difference into our future. So it looks like personal networks and environmental groups, nonprofits are where people are engaging the most. So that's really insightful. And it's nice to see that all of them are also tagged in some way. So that's great. Okay, well, we're going to go on to our next topic, which is the renewable energy. So key themes from the discussion on renewable energy. I think everyone is in agreement that renewable energy is essential for reaching net zero by 2050. So, you know, whether it's at a federal level or in our own municipal goals, that's the goal for us. Small communities can own their power. So that was a really interesting concept that was brought forward in the film. And I think a lot of people really were struck by that and thought, wow, that's a really cool way to think. Solar microgrid technology can be implemented in Canada. I mean, I guess different groups probably had different views on that, because the Calgary discussion, we actually had people talking, well, that's maybe more something that would happen in developing nations than in our nation, because we are a bit of an energy abundant country, but different perspectives. So I think it's great to consider how it could be implemented in Canada. Energy decentralization is critical for improving the well-being of poorer nations, addressing the lack of resilience in our current infrastructure. And some discussion questions, which is the predominant renewable energy model in your area? So, you know, solar was talked about a lot. We saw our drawdown person sitting on a wind turbine a lot of the time in the film. Is there community support for both, or maybe even other renewable energies? And do you know of any community renewable energy cooperatives? So yeah, we'll have some open discussion if anyone wants to pipe in. And maybe I can start if oh, I see Audrey. Go ahead, Audrey.
Hi there. Over a decade ago, I was a part of a renewable energy cooperative, and we worked really hard on community awareness about why renewable energy was so important. And, you know, people really loved it. They loved the idea of being a collaborative group of people who built a solar, at the time it was called a large FIT, a feed-in tariff, a large feed-in tariff, and that they would be part of controlling whether or not we had clean energy in our community. And another really successful community energy cooperative is in just outside of London, and it's the Oxford community. Don't know if anybody's aware of it, but they have an incredibly large wind energy cooperative, and they have enough power to power their entire small community. And if you look around, and this was over a decade ago, there are a lot of small European cities that are starting to create community energy cooperatives as well, and taking ownership back on their power. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, I see quite a few comments in the chat as well, but I guess I want to encourage some new people to contribute to the discussion. And I see Iman is on the call. Iman, I'm sure you have some cool ideas that you want to share with the group. And sorry if I'm putting you on the spot. Well, maybe not. Okay. Sorry, I really want to get more people involved. Maybe Frederick, would you like to contribute to the discussion?
I just have a sort of a comment. So I know some people in my circles that were trying to do energy efficient housing, putting, recycling water through their house and solar panels and such. And they actually, this is in Alberta, near Calgary, and they stopped doing it because the expense of paying into the grid when they were trying to be off grid and having to not be able, it cost them money to put power into the grid, and so they gave up. It was just too expensive for them to continue it as a small family trying to do the right thing. So I wonder if anyone else has any experiences like that or comments around that.
So I see that Mina has a comment. Why don't you go ahead, Mina?
When I watched, I saw emissions for vehicles, and I think that what is given as emissions for vehicles is totally wrong, because we live in an auto-centric society, and it's not just tailpipe emissions or manufacturing of the vehicles. You have to include all of the things that are associated with vehicles, which is road building and maintenance. And then the automobile brought us fast food. It brought us big box stores. It eliminated a lot of things that were done locally. And I think the emissions would be very much higher. And unless we move away from an auto-centric society, we're still going to be in a lot of trouble in this climate emergency.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mina. And I guess, what do people think about how realistic the film was? Because the film was saying that we're going to become more dependent on autonomous vehicle on public transit, where we won't need to use our car. We won't feel obligated to have or own a car. I wonder what people think about that. Or even having an electric car, I guess, tying it back to renewable energy, because I don't want to deviate too far away from that. What do people think about, the the electric cars? Adrita, you had a comment?
Oh, yeah. So I was just talking about the Avatar Accelerator, which was recently just launched in Calgary. And I just think it's a really cool program because it takes oil and gas workers and gets them to work on these solutions, taking, topics like renewables, carbon capture, hydrogen, and things like that, and kind of getting them to work on the solution. So not only does it create more awareness of these that you can bring back to your company, but also it's to kind of engage them in the conversation. So it's not like a or type of discussion, but more of like an and, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the problem is, we're not going to instantaneously switch from our current energy sources to renewable energy, but how can we transition? So the transition piece is the really critical piece. So that's a really interesting initiative that you're talking about, Adrita.
I think Tom and Emily had their hands up.
Okay, we'll go with Tom first.
Yeah, my comment on electric vehicles. Although at the end of the day they produce zero emissions, you have to understand they are manufactured in the same traditional fashion that gas-powered automobiles are manufactured. They require raw resources for the body panels, the engines, everything related to the manufacturing of that. The battery packs are very complicated, utilizing rare earth elements, to produce them and have an average of a 10 to 12 year lifespan. They're not, and right now at this time, they're very not efficient in terms of recyclability from those battery packs. So there is no circular economy or circular principles built into the manufacturing of these electric vehicles. Yes, I totally agree. They could create zero emissions, but producing these products is still not net zero at the end of the day.
Yeah, And can you suggest, like, do you think it's just more R&D is required, or do we need to have better techniques? Like, I know lithium extraction is a really big issue that comes up when you talk about electric vehicles. Like, do we need better extraction methods that are less harmful, or what do you suggest?
No, we shouldn't be extracting raw resources. We have a massive resource of already recyclable materials, but the advocates out there who want to extract raw resources believe utilizing recyclable material will minimize the quality of the end result. Studies haven't been really effective in terms of proving that, but that is the linear mindset in terms of our manufacturing industry when it comes to some of these products. So I'd be impressed if there were an electric vehicle manufacturer out there that does produce an electric vehicle out of 100% recyclable material, sourced material.
Yeah, well, I guess that's a challenge that we should be advocating for, because yeah, it's true. We have enough materials already. Why can't we just recycle, and maybe we can prove that it's just as good quality. Yeah, or at least the quality that we need to make it functional. And Emily, I think you had a comment as well.
Yeah, thanks. This is Emily from Toronto. It's kind of slightly off topic of renewable energy, but it's the idea of car sharing. I'm sort of in the process of, I recently had access to a car, but I no longer do. And so I'm sort of trying to decide, do I buy a car, or are there enough alternatives to not buy one? And I'm actually pretty excited about the idea of not buying one. And I recently signed up for a car share program, but I forgot about the communauté, the one that was mentioned. Referenced, yeah, mentioned earlier. And so I'm excited, and I think the more availability of these sharing opportunities, with cars or other things, just will create more demand for them, and also just, I think, help the planet. I don't know if this, it's not exactly on top of the renewable energy, but I just wanted to share that, just me participating in this webinar reminds me of that car share program, and it's one step closer to me not buying a car. So I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and we do have transportation as one of our themes later on, so I won't elaborate too much on that one yet, because I do have some definite thoughts around it too. Were there any other questions from the floor? And sorry if I'm having trouble seeing people's hands up.
Erin, Preston had a good comment about reducing demand. Maybe we can talk about that a bit.
Sure, Preston, go ahead.
Yeah, I was in the construction industry for quite a few years, and I've got a few friends that are still working as architects and otherwise in the green building sector. And the first piece of that whole puzzle is always about reduction. Stuff like passive house standards, which if you look at the building stock in Toronto, so much it was built at the turn of the century or only renovated 50 years ago, that we have extraordinary amounts of energy that are lost through our building systems. And so part of the system needs to be to first look at that energy reduction, and then it becomes much, much easier for renewable energies to be able to recover that end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I know that's a federal focus as well, so hopefully we'll see more money, grant money going into programs that would support retrofits of buildings. I think Audrey, you had your hand up.
I've been doing some courses in net zero building as well as passive house. And to reflect on Preston's comment, it's incredibly important in the building industry right now that they change the code. The code is going to go through. Just a little insight here, in the next 3 years, code will be demanding that houses, within 15 years, all houses will have to be net zero. There will also be federal incentives for retrofits and renovations to get closer and closer to net zero in standards. So it's coming, and the heating side of it is actually going to cost less. And the cooling side is actually going to cost more. And but the biggest impact in homes in the next 10 to 15 years will be occupant behavior for energy use. It will no longer be your heating and your cooling. Those will be minimal because the envelope of the house and the way it's constructed will reduce energy needs to such a huge degree that it'll just be occupant behavior and plug loads that will be the energy user.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting to hear. That's the future of what's coming out. And I think Mina had given a really interesting comment too, that we default to having garages attached to houses, and maybe that may become a thing of the past as well. I want to keep us going because we do have a poll question. So let's go on to our poll question for renewable energy. So what is driving the implementation of renewable energy in your area? Maybe there's no focus on it, or you figure there's no focus on it. Your public utility is building renewable energy. A feed-in tariff program is available. So there's a little explanation at the bottom of the slide about what feed-in tariffs are. For those of you in Calgary, I think a company like Bullfrog Power that offers wind power to supplement the energy sources is an example of that. Net metering program is another choice. We have cooperatively owned renewable energy projects like solar cooperatives, or you don't know. And yeah, I think there is definitely a spectrum of understanding in this area, because when Audrey brought up the feed-in tariff term, I had trouble understanding what that meant. So, and maybe Audrey, you may just want to elaborate a little bit so people understand what that is.
Sure, and I think this was a little bit of one of the chat comments where they were doing a feed-in tariff, but it cost them more than what they were receiving back. And the utility was basically keeping some of the money that they were generating. So there are, in Ontario, we were very lucky. We had a feed-in tariff program where you were paid X amount of cents per kilowatt for feeding into the grid. And they were trying to incentivize people to do micro fits on their homes. And then there was competition for large fit, which would be like a solar farm or a wind project. And so what they did is they judged on what did it cost you for your capital expense on your panels and your install. And then they basically would guarantee you about a 6 to 9% return on your investment. So it was very generous, and it encouraged a lot of people to install. The public didn't understand it. They were upset about it. They preferred that people didn't receive money because they felt it was their tax dollars paying their neighbor to have solar panels on their roof. And I can say this because I have a microfit, and my neighbors had those kinds of comments. But what they would prefer to see their money go to would be a nuclear plant, where there are a lot of things that don't work in nuclear plants either, and your tax dollars aren't being used effectively. So it's really a difficult thing for provinces to decide whether to do an offer for a feed-in tariff. Some utilities might do it, but basically it helps generate capital for green energy when each homeowner or private projects of solar farms, they absorb the capital cost, and therefore it's not at the cost of the taxpayers. And they maintain the equipment. They become their own energy provider. So if I have a solar panel that breaks and I can't produce any more kilowatts from that panel, that's my problem, and I have to replace it at my own cost. So in some ways, it's better for the public to have smaller micro energy producers that don't weigh so heavily on the central system. But everyone has a different opinion, so it has suffered a little bit, feed-in tariff.
Well, and I think even in the movie they were talking about the resiliency that it builds into the network when you have many small people kind of owning the system versus dependent all on a centralized system. But I want to just acknowledge that I really appreciate people who have been brave enough to respond to the poll even when they don't know, because sometimes that's hard to admit. And I think this poll is showing that we still need some more education and awareness and maybe explanation of what the solutions are in this area. So I'm kind of glad we have this poll to sort of draw that out. And I encourage you that, we see different people participating in the poll, and maybe people are a little bit nervous to participate when they don't fully know an area, but it'd be great to get your response even if you're not sure of something too. So so thanks for responding to that poll. And we're going to go on to our next one, which is the measuring impact topic theme.
Meaningful.
Yeah, meaningful community action, sorry. So the key theme around enabling meaningful community action, some ways that this is what came out of the local discussion, is some ways to foster meaningful community action would be to get creative with partnerships and align actions. So, you know, there's an example from Climate Action London, who worked with 4 nature-based nonprofits, and they held a native plant sale, increasing awareness in native plants and creating exposure for the groups that are growing them, and creating a space for conversation around it and around conservation. Viewing our groups as one coalition instead of separate entities. And I know that's definitely something that's true in Calgary, where we sometimes feel a little bit siloed, but there's an initiative in Calgary now called Transition Series, where groups are trying to come together to leverage what each other's doing in a kind of a centralized way of some sort. So we are making efforts in that regard. Improving volunteer onboarding, engagement, and retention. You know, a lot of nonprofit groups, it's maybe the first time we've ran or been part of a nonprofit, or it's always hard to figure out how do we have that training for volunteers to get them up to speed quickly and keep retaining them and keep them engaged. Participating in developing sustainability action plans. So, you know, having a plan is a first step. I think a lot of groups kind of just meander through what they think they need to do, but maybe don't always have a very focused or formalized plan. And then support solutions relating to community renewable energy, green transit, local circular business models, you know, just that overall education on it too. So what are barriers to enabling meaningful community action? What types of community action have you seen bring real change? And how can we close the gap to bring individual actors, environmental groups, government representatives, and businesses together in a meaningful way? So I would encourage you to join the conversation. And I see that Asha has a comment. Why don't you go ahead, Asha? Asha?
Sorry. I just put it in the chat that during our conversation, in London, 50% of total emission comes from cars. And one of the engineer who works at the city suggested that if we had sharing programs and smart self-driving cars that could talk to us, like we talk to Siri or Alexa, that after the car had dropped us off, we could had some cars to go and make extra money and pick up and drop off other neighbors. It could really come, it really comes as a shift in attitudes and public narrative. So I'm sorry, you're talking about communities right now, but
well, I mean, I guess you're talking about shifting our perception of what we can do. And yeah, I mean, it's a little bit related to our last topic, which is totally fine too. I like the idea of the Uber Car2Go, a kind of a hybrid solution that combines a couple of different solutions that maybe we're doing singly. So that's a really great idea.
But I think it's also those cars being part of the community own. So one car or 2 cars could serve a street, or, you know, a 3 households, something like that. But it was addressed to a topic that you had mentioned before about cars and energy and so on. So thank you.
Yeah.
It's really about public narrative.
Yes, yes. Lori, did you want to speak to your comment?
Sure. I was going to tap onto, just as a joke, onto the last comment about car sharing. In our city of Calgary, maybe everywhere, but on our street for sure, if people park in front of somebody else's house, people get irate. So I just can't imagine how car sharing is going to work on a block where people don't even know each other. But the other thing that I was commenting on in the chat was the challenges of where especially some bigger organizations are trying to own the space and control the narrative and control the resources around these things, or organizations that are so focused on, say, climate change, and they're not understanding how that connects to fair trade and circular economy, and the work that some of us have been doing in the space to help people become aware of how the Sustainable Development Goals intersect and how each individual piece, no matter what you're doing in that space, is affecting everybody else. And so I don't know if there's any good resources out there to sort of teach us how to do that, other than just our own relationship building, but it's going to take forever if we just have to do it one group at a time, like we've kind of been doing in Calgary.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a point, and it's kind of related to a theme that we didn't really vote as a priority, but intersectionality of how different initiatives cross over each other, kind of like we all are part of a bit of a network where if we make change in one domain, it can actually have a ripple effect to other sustainable initiatives or sustainable development goals. And I guess realizing that there is that ripple effect and how it's connected. Maybe we need to do like a workshop connecting the dots for people, because yeah, sometimes it feels like it's a real struggle. Audrey, go ahead.
Yeah, I love that topic, Erin. We should do a workshop on that. And one of the reasons I fell in love with the circular economy is because it gives you an example of how everything is interconnected. And so as an example, I belong to a group in my city of Aurelia, and it's called Sustainable Aurelia. And we have sector committees. And so there's, let's say, 8 sectors. You know, one is transportation, one is education, one is health, one is goods and services, so on and so on. And the committees seem very disconnected. And the whole mission of the organization, you know, is sustainability. But, you know, for a lot of people, that's such a broad context. But now we're looking at being, you know, introducing circular city thoughts and ways to look at things. Now, if you took circular city principles and you spoke to all those different sectors and you said to each sector, how does your topic or your issue, your concern relate to circular cities as an overall application? And then you start to see how each affect each other. And then the initiatives have crossovers that can be talked about because you're all part of one project, which is a circular city. So it's incredibly valuable. The mapping of a circular city is it just brings it all together. And it's such a hot topic right now. And so many cities are getting on board. I mean, Emily, you could speak to that. Toronto's going through that right now. And it's really worthwhile introducing that to your councillors.
Yeah, I guess that's the key part, because I know in Calgary we developed a circular city plan, but then hasn't really gone very much further yet. So yeah, I guess we should probably move on to our poll question for this, because we are running a little bit out of time and we probably won't be able to talk about our last theme. But which community action will you prioritize? Either partner with local organizations, volunteer and join a grassroots organization, contribute to sustainability action plans, support local businesses, campaign for environmental policy. And we're only letting you, I think, pick one, because there's, you know, I'm sure a lot of people want to click all of them, but campaign for environmental policy, engage with your business network, engage with your personal network, engage with your government rep. Oh, I'm surprised there's not more for government rep, but that's okay. I'm gonna wait and see how this plays out. Okay, partner with local organizations, campaign for environmental policy. Okay, well, policy is related somewhat to government too, so that's a good one. Engage with your personal network. Yeah, you know, starts personally. Great. Well, thank you. So I apologize, we're not going to have a chance to talk about transportation, but I think we kind of already did because it was related to the renewable energy conversation. And, you know, I'm sure we could all talk forever on the rest of the themes as well, but I think we got some really good diverse discussion going. So, so now we have to go, and this is going to be tricky for you, Audrey. You have to get Oh, okay, you're on the right slide. So you're on the key themes and messages. So for the first, so now we have to renumber these, but basically we had, you know, food systems being number 1. So yeah, food systems was number 1, education was number 2. Maybe we can just change the numbers and not have to do too much more. Education was number 2. Renewables was number 3. Meaningful conversations or meaningful community action was number 4. And transportation was number 5. And maybe we'll just leave the rest of them blank for now. So we'll take out 6, 7, and 8. Not that we shouldn't address these two, but they just didn't cut to the top of our priorities. So, and you know, I want to set expectations because we're not going to come to our final call to action in this meeting because we only have 8 minutes left on this call. But, you know, through the discussion and the Circular Economy Club chapters who are on this call, who have been part of the organizing committee for this, this whole event and this whole series of events, are going to take all of the information and all of the feedback, including all the stuff that was mentioned in the chat that we didn't get to speak directly to, and we're going to come up with a call to action for each one of our top priorities. So, you know, if you have additional comments to share, please do so in the chat. You know, we're gonna, it's just because we're not going to be able to synthesize everything here on the call, but I did want everybody to know kind of where we're at, and also please, you know, continue to provide your input. Even if you think of something after the session today, feel free to email Audrey or myself. So my email is circulareconomyclubyyc@gmail.com, and I think Audrey has hers earlier in the chat, but Audrey, maybe you want to put your email in the chat again. I will let Tom make one last comment because I know he had a comment from before.
Thanks very much. I want to talk about community action plans.
Hey, Tom, can you speak up a little bit for us?
Yeah, can you hear me clearly now?
That's better.
Yeah, I wanted to speak a little bit about community action and community action initiatives. York Region announced about 2 months ago a circular economy initiative.
Oh, you're mute. Oh.
That was very community focused. It's called the Circular Economy Initiatives Fund in York Region. It's about waste reduction, environmental footprint, but some of the key criteria are community driven and foster community partnerships, and clearly articulate how impacts of activities proposed will be measured. So, you know, data, metrics, and demonstrating, you know, innovative ideas in terms of how to waste reduction, minimize waste, treat waste as a resource, and extend the life following circular principles, plus another number of criteria. It's nonprofit focused, but I was able to partner with a local nonprofit initiative in York Region because we share a lot of mutual synergies to focus on, you know, this waste reduction, environmental footprint, and community focus. But it's a great model in terms of what communities are starting to do, you know, to introduce circular principles and the circular economy within the mindsets of their community, plus as an education point in terms of what to do with, it's not waste, it's a resource, that kind of mentality.
Great, thank you, Tom. And I'm hoping you put that resource in the chat if people want to connect into that. That would be great. We're going to do a wrap up now, so we'll go on to the next one. So as I mentioned, we do have next steps. So following today's event, all of the chapters, the organizers will review the comments and generate a unified circular economy vision based on the comments and the discussion today. And we, you know, it's a bit of a job to distill down from all of the conversation we've been having, but I think there are definitely some clear directions on where we see things needing to go in Canada. And once we have that circular economy vision and commitment, we want you to help us spread the word, because we're going to have social media visuals that will be created basically summarizing our vision and commitment. And we'd like everyone to share and promote this on Earth Day on April 22nd. So, you know, stay tuned if you have plugged into a local event or you've plugged into this national discussion. We will be emailing anyone who's participated in all of the events, whether on a local level or on the national level, just so that we can get the biggest breadth and reach of this message to everyone, and really encourage everyone to also keep each other accountable to this commitment, because I think as circular economy club chapters across Canada, we'll want to regroup and measure how we're doing, measure if we're actually acting on the commitment. So so yeah, and I see that George, you have your hand. Did you want to add a comment?
Yeah, just a final comment, Erin, on circular economy clubs, just so that everyone knows that this is not just a Canadian initiative. Circular economy clubs, it's a global group. And so this initiative with the 2040 film is happening worldwide at the same time. So understand that this is not just a Canadian activity. This is happening. You're part of a global group.
Yeah, and I encourage you to take a look at the website Circular Economy Club. I think it's circulareconomyclubs.org, where we have like all the different chapters worldwide. And the cool thing is that there's so many grassroots conversations that happen at periodic times. You know, we're very honored to have Citra and the City of Toronto hosting the World Circular Economy Forum in the fall of this year. So, you know, Canada is actually hosting this World Circular Economy Forum. There are going to be other ways for you to plug in, both in your region or, you know, online, because a lot of the events leading up to this forum are going to be online. I think until we know for sure we can go back to in-person events. So please do check out and tune into what your local chapter is doing, because there's going to be a lot happening between now and the fall. I do want to also just thank everyone who's participated in a local discussion and in the national discussion here today. I know in Calgary we had some special guest speakers who were, you know, experts in certain areas that were able to talk about like urban farming and renewable energy and things like that. So I just want to thank everyone who participated in all the discussions, for taking time out of your busy schedule to participate today. For those who have watched the film, please encourage more people to keep watching the film and think about the ideas and solutions that it presents. And yes, please just stay in touch, and thank you all for attending today. Audrey, did you want to say any last words as well?
Yes, I want to say a big, huge shout out to the team that has evolved through this. We all were working independently in our circular economy clubs in different cities, and we connected and we worked together so beautifully. I've made new friends. I feel great. I'm so impressed with everyone's passion, and we are going to continue. I feel we're going to continue. We have some more projects going on. I'll just let everyone know that we're working on a side event for the World Circular Economy Forum, and that side event will showcase Canadian circular economy business. And we have high hopes that it's going to be a wonderful project that brings great awareness to what's going on in Canada. So yeah. This is amazing work, and our team is incredible. Anybody who would like to join our team, get on to circulareconomyclub.org and join the chapter closest to you, and get a hold of your organizer and come on board. It's been fun. So thank you everyone who has worked on this event.
Great, thanks. And thank you, Audrey, for your leadership, because you're the one who really instigated this whole movement. So thank you so much.
Before everyone goes off the line, I just also want to add a couple of things. One, almost every single person on this call stayed on the call. We had very few people leave. That's very amazing these days. People are tending to pop in and out of meetings willy-nilly. So I really appreciate everyone staying. And I know there was a lot of communications and links for people to connect in the chat. And so I just want to offer you the opportunity, if you want to save the chat for yourself, we'll of course be saving it. But down where you have where you're going to chat, there's those 3 dots. If you click it, there's a more option, and feel free to save the chat for yourself so that you can connect with the people that you are trying to connect with today. I don't want you to feel like you've lost that information when the meeting closes.
Great. Well, until next time, everyone, have a great evening, and we'll talk again soon, and stay tuned for our commitment and vision messages.